Hey, PreSales Collective, it's your host, James Kaikis, and today I'm going to be joined by Lee Johnson, Solutions Architecture and Sales Engineering Lead at Virtustream. Lee is also the chairman of the PreSales Collective DEEI Council. The topic of today's episode is leading from the front. Today's episode is about PreSales Collective's new diversity, equity, equality, and inclusion program that Lee is leading. We are really excited about this program. In today's episode, we're going to talk about the genesis of this program and really get to know Lee. I've had the privilege of getting to know Lee Johnson really well over the last couple months. I always enjoy my conversations with him, and he has helped make me more aware of what we can do with PreSales Collective to make a broader impact on the global community. So in today's episode, we're going to unpack all of that. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Today's episode is sponsored by Consensus. Scale your pre-sales organization with interactive video demos. Experience an interactive demo at goconsensus.com. Hey, Lee, welcome to the PreSales Podcast. How's it going today?
Thank you for having me.
It is great to have you. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Wow, we've been slacking. You actually had to turn me on to Slack a long time ago. I've used it, but I haven't used it. So thank you for being my pseudo user manual into all things Slack. You know, I'm a technologist, but I'm still struggling with some of the new platforms. And there are so many new platforms these days. You know, the other day I got an invitation for Clubhouse and I'm like, well, what is this? And it's another one that I need to figure out what's going on over here. Learning a new platform means that I have to take out time from things that I want to do, like help my kids to grow and read a book. I'm actually starting a new book from Grant Cardone called The 10X Rule. And I saw a webinar with him the other day, and the guy has a lot of energy. I really don't know if I want to be like that guy because it doesn't seem as though relationships are so strong for him. But, you know, with me, it's always about take the things that I find value in and leave the rest. So I'm going to read the book, figure out how this guy was able to become such a major player, and take what I found valuable, and I'll leave the rest.
I like that, Lee. We've gotten to know each other pretty well over the last couple months. Went from a couple Slack messages to we've been meeting weekly, and we'll talk about that momentarily. But want to say one, thank you for leading really from the front, which is the title of today's episode, on what was originally the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion program for PreSales Collective, which has now been turned into the Diversity, Equity, Equality, Inclusion program, which we'll get into. But it's been awesome getting to know you. And I'm really excited to, one, talk about what you're doing with that program. But more importantly, thank you for raising your hand and being such a great partner and educating me on what we need to be doing for the pre-sales community.
Well, I have to extend a thank you back to you because many people find this career by chance. And at the end of last year, I had an opening on my team. And I really wanted to find a diverse broad of candidates. And I searched the internet day and night, just looking for groups and different forums where I would be able to communicate to the world the opening that I had on my team. And that's how I found PreSales Collective. If I didn't find PreSales Collective, I was going to then have to create one. So you basically just saved the year in my life that you already created one. And I could just leverage your hard work and use that as a medium to broadcast to the world that pre-sales is a pretty good place to land a job. You know, you have that fluidity of talking with different customers, but the field has to mature just a bit because pre-sales means different things to different people. I think we even struggle to identify what we want to be called. Do we want to be called solution engineers, sales engineers, technical sales? It's just so many different things. I want to help to bring some maturity to the discipline as a whole.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Lee. And I'm glad you stumbled into PreSales Collective. So I'm going to ask you a stumbling question as well. How did you get into pre-sales? Tell us your story.
Woo. Right now, when I had my resume updated about 3 years ago, I had put, I'm about 20 years into my career. she changed it to 15 plus. So I've had a long career, exited university in 1998. Wow, that goes a way back. But to make a long story short, I've been in SAP since about 2000. And SAP has been very good to me. It's been very good to my career. It allows me to travel all over the world. I've spent time in Europe. I've spent time in Africa. I've spent time in Singapore. And Singapore was a great experience because it allowed me to just visit a number of different cultures. But I got into pre-sales when there was a paradigm shift happening in the SAP space where SAP was moving to an in-memory data platform that they call HANA. And SAP was also transitioning to the cloud. So there were two paradigm shifts happening at the same time. So I found an opportunity with a company named Virtustream, which was a startup. And I applied for the role, not having so much cloud experience, but having significant SAP experience. And I applied for that role just because it had SAP in the job description and was within my wheelhouse. And I had to go out and learn, well, what was cloud, because they had a private cloud that was competing against the hyperscalers. I've been in pre-sales since 2015. And in 2018, I got promoted to a leadership role, and now I manage a team. I call them Rockstar Solution Engineers. And that's my journey as I landed into pre-sales. At that point in time, I really knew what to do from the experience that I had, but it was something that I had to figure out from a cloud perspective, understanding what cloud was. And really, it was similar to what I was doing on premises, but I had to change the model for the discipline that we were moving into at that point in time. So trying to figure out what the job really entailed, being in front of customers. I've been in delivery all my career. So I was that back office guy, right? I was the guy who took the opportunity after it was sold, and I put together the project plan, built a team, and delivered those solutions. Now I'm in front of it. So I have an empathy for the guy who receives it on the delivery side to make sure that it's sound. But now I have a whole different appreciation for sales and pre-sales and forecasting and all of that part of the business.
I love that story, Lee, and I appreciate you sharing that perspective. One of the things that you mentioned was being able to go see different cultures and learn about different cultures as well. And I think that's one of the best things about working in pre-sales is you do get those opportunities to travel. And I remember for me early in my career, my company was like, hey, we're going to send you to Europe. I didn't even own a passport. I had to literally rush a passport. And then I spent 4 or 5 years traveling the world literally on a quarterly basis. And it's pretty amazing. And it really does open up your eyes to what else is out there. And, it's a great profession and great career if your lifestyle can allow it to happen.
Let me ask you, did your company allow you to travel on business class?
Not business class, but I wasn't complaining.
I complained. I'm 6'3". Being in the economy was rough, especially traveling to South Africa. If you go from Atlanta, it's about a 12-hour, 13-hour flight to Johannesburg. And if you fly over to Britain and then you take it down, it's equally long, right? So 6 hours, 7 hours on the flight over the pond and all the way down. So I was happy that I got hired on at Accenture as a manager, because any flight over, I think it was 4 or 6 hours, you could do business. And of course, I pampered myself just a little bit while I was there.
Just a little bit, right?
Just a little bit. I sacrificed for the company. So,
Lee, I'm excited to talk about today's topic, leading from the front. So I briefly talked about how we've gotten to know each other, but maybe even a step back is that we were looking to create a leadership group for the Washington, D.C. chapter of PreSales Collective. And we had been going back and forth, and we jumped on a call and you said, hey, James, instead of doing local chapter, I'd love to get involved in something more. And we talked about diversity, equity, equality, and inclusion. And I want to talk about that because our new program with PreSales Collective is DE2I. And so I'd love if you could break down the DE2I and talk to me about why you wanted this responsibility.
We are in a transitive point in the United States today. And this is a good segue because you have an appreciation for your home once you've gone abroad and you've lived in other cultures. Like for me, when I was in South Africa, I was there for 2 years, give or take. I was there so long, I met my wife, got married, etc. And then after leaving Africa, we went to Singapore. And, Singapore is a central hub for all things Asia. So we were able to go to KL, we were able to go to Bangkok, we were able to just hit so many different cultures. But in the middle of it is Singapore. I'm a foodie somewhat, right? I just like to eat. I don't really care what it is. If it tastes good, I'm going to eat it. And in Singapore, I was able to get some Thai and some Malay and some Indian all in one, right? But, coming back to the question is, while we were back at home, my wife didn't really have an experience with American culture, so everything is brand new to her. But George Floyd and, Trayvon Martin, as a man of color, as an African American, this is my experience every day, right? But what was transformative about the George Floyd incident, the murder, to be perfectly honest, let's don't mince words, is that we need to have a reckoning inside of America. One, because this is 400 years of a conversation that hasn't been had. And I believe that we're all not achieving our full potential because we have these different hurdles and roadblocks in between us. So I figured that I could sit on the sidelines and watch, or I could be active in doing something. So when the opportunity came and the conversation was had with you about doing something in the DC area, because at that time when I found you all, I didn't see that there was an official chapter, right? And one of my whys in life is to evangelize about what pre-sales is. And since I saw that there wasn't a chapter, I said, hey, James, let's jump on this. But then when we had the conversation about, there's something else that we could do, which is another why of mine with respect to diversity, I can tell you, even when I was in South Africa, when I went into boardrooms, I was one person of color. The problem for me with that is I kind of sort of bounced around in my career. I figured that if I had a mentor or I had someone who looked like me who would be able to tell me the story, and it doesn't have to be an official mentoring relationship or sponsorship. It's just someone who's going to give me a tidbit to say, hey, I see where you're going. I think that you have promise in your career. Let me give you a little bit of advice. And that nugget is something that I would put into my toolkit, and I would be able to take that further. Now, where we are with social media and many different platforms, this is a conversation that we need to have. This is a conversation that we need to have because I want to look at it from the perspective that we are all humans. I want to erase race and just replace it with humanity. James is James, Lee is Lee. Let's figure out what we have in common with each other. I know it's grand and it's utopian, but we got to start somewhere so that we can break down these barriers, because I guarantee you, once we have a conversation, I see that you're a Beatles fan just by zooming into your house. Let's have a conversation about that beautiful song, Come All the People Living in the World in Peace. I know that song. I probably shouldn't because I grew up in Jersey City, New Jersey, right? Right? Where I lived in my neighborhood, we didn't have a lot of diversity, but I took it upon myself to step outside of my comfort zone and to go into a place. I have a tweet that I sent out a couple months back that said, the magic happens outside of your comfort zone. And Emmanuel Ochi, he talks about the conversation, and the conversation is going to be uncomfortable. But in order to start breaking down these barriers that separate us, I want to find what's common between the two of us, and also do that from the pre-sales lens so that we could have diversity. And diversity means a lot of things to a number of people. There's diversity, racial diversity. There's sex diversity. There's gender diversity. So we have all of these different things. And I believe the foundation for how we can build DE squared I, and the reason why we wanted to go with the two E's, because we understand diversity, we understand inclusion, but we have the E in most programs are DEI, which means that one E has to get left out. I believe that there are distinct differences between equity and equality. And we will definitely unpack that, because the foundation upon which I believe we can build out this platform is to start with educating through understanding. And if we're going to have a conversation, we have to make sure that the baseline, the words that we're using, what is diversity? We can unpack what is diversity so that we can have a full conversation about it, and then put a pre-sales lens on it and figure out how we can do things to increase diversity inside the space. I was on the website earlier today, and the number is we have about 500,000 pre-sales professionals in the world. So that means that there's a tremendous opportunity for this work. And we're going to have a collective where people want to come into this. They want to see the good that we're going to do. And I'm a raving fan of James Clear and his book, Atomic Habits. And inside of his book, he talks about all you have to do is make a 1% improvement. In the book, it says that if you make a 1% improvement every day, at the end of the year, you'll be 37 times better. So I talked to my team about, let's make the 1% improvement, because quite often I see that people want to go with the big bang approach. And sometimes the big bang approach misses because you spent so much time planning, etc. You didn't get it out into the world. And I believe that let's get it out into the world, use a DevOps type of analogy, CI/CD methodology, where get it out into the world, you can fix it. You can fix it as you have it out there, you get the experience, etc. So that's the methodology that I believe that we can use in order to try to figure this thing out together, right? And if the world sees what we're doing and they like what we're doing, they can share it along with us. This is going to be open source for sure.
I really appreciate that response. I appreciate the openness and the vulnerability as well. I really love what you've put together here and the desire to help better, not just the pre-sales profession, but the world generally. And we've talked a lot about education and the education and starting the conversation. And so I think you've done a tremendous job of that. And I really appreciate your effort. Let's talk a little bit about the mission and the objectives of DE squared I. Can you talk about those?
As we mentioned, there's 400 years of a conversation that needs to be had, right? As we think about it, you have, of course, from my perspective as a Black man, we have the instance where every day I have to experience being a Black man. And it's sometimes you almost have to have two personas. I have to have a persona when I'm outside of work and trying to hang out with my buddies from the 90s and 80s. You know, we were children of hip hop and different things of that sort. And then when I come to work, I have to put on my professional hat. I could actually probably be an actor because I'm able to switch between those personas at any point in time. But the mission is really going to be around defining diversity, defining equity, defining equality, and defining inclusion. Those are topics that you could probably write a chapter in a book about. We will do the work and bring it to this forum. And for me, I believe that most people are good. There will definitely be a few bad folks out there, but for the most part, I believe that most people are good, and I want to get to that source of good and then start building out of relationship. I could give you a story. When I showed up in Singapore, I didn't notice beforehand, but there are a few Chinese who named their child Johnson. And of course, Lee is a very common surname, right? So at Accenture, at that point in time, there wasn't like a profile database where you could have your picture and things of that sort. So when I showed up, they were expecting Johnson Lee to show up. So they were expecting an Asian guy.
Wow.
And here comes this 6'3" black guy is showing up. They were like, "Are you the right Johnson Lee?" "Yeah, no, it's Lee Johnson." Right? So that was, just a fun experience about the differences that you have from these different cultures. And, I've transcended where I come from. Right. I've grown, because my world was very small once upon a time. And I've gotten to see the world just because I went to college and I learned this thing called SAP. So we got to increase that. Most of the folks who I interact with on a day are, Caucasian males. And I would want to have females inside of my group. I would want to have more people of color inside of my group. I want to have what is now termed the Bouquet of Humanity. I want to see lots of people because I think all of us have something that we can bring to the table, different diversity of opinion. Just looking at it from a different viewpoint could actually help in how we solutioning and deliver our services. And there is upside because, now there is data that proves that having a diverse community of employees or having diversity in that your employees look like your customer base, there is value to that. So there is top line impacts that diversity can have inside of your workforce. So I want to see that.
That's incredible, Lee. And I love the Bouquet of Humanity. I mean, that's so elegantly put. One, it's amazing to have these conversations with you because they open up my eyes, right? And the fact that you feel like that you have to have two different personas, your personal and professional, could be an actor. I mean, that's not okay at the end of the day. And I think you telling your story and opening up about these situations allow other people who maybe don't feel that situation or are not as in tune with what's happening, allow them to have a little bit of empathy and allow them to educate themselves on the situations that are affecting Black men like yourself, women in the workplace, and all races that feel marginalized per se.
Well, the one thing that I want to express, and this is my opinion, this is just Lee Johnson's opinion. It's not a mandate. I don't feel as though I'm in a position where I could speak for all Black people. But what I wanted to say is that I don't feel as though I need sympathy from anyone. I don't need anything handed to me. I want to compete, and that's where the equality comes into place. I want a clear field so that I am able to compete for the opportunity. Now, where the equity comes in is that there might have to be some preparation that I have to do in order to qualify for that opportunity. I think that we're going to have a conversation about imposter syndrome on the 12th, but I actually picked up a book, and as you guys probably know who are hearing this, I love to read. I spend as little time actually watching television. I like to read a book. So as I was starting this initiative at Dell Technologies, we had a program called the Diversity and Inclusion Ambassador Program, which I dove into and got that certification, and it included a significant amount of training and reading. And I came across an article. It was a Harvard Business Review by Dr. Robert Livingston, who is a professor at Harvard Kennedy School, I believe it is. And he wrote a book called The Conversation. So I took it upon myself to read that book end to end so that I can prepare myself for this initiative that we were going to lead. And what I got out of that is Dr. Livingston has created a framework so that we could attack problems. And it's called PRESS. And PRESS stands for problem awareness, root cause analysis, empathy, but empathy is broken out. It's a level of concern about the problem and the people it afflicts. 4 is going to be strategies for addressing the problem. And then there is sacrifice, but sacrifice isn't that you have to give up something. Sacrifice is that you're willing to invest the time, energy, and resources necessary for strategy implementation. When I look at PRESS, I look at this as a framework that I could use for my work. And at Dell Technologies, we have a framework called DAD, which is discovery. Discovery is similar to problem awareness. And then you have the root cause analysis, which is analyze. Then you have a design and defend as a part of the DAD framework. But when I look at PRESS, I actually see that PRESS is something that we can use both internal to work as well as external to work. So I love the framework, but also he had something that he talked about, which is called stereotype threat. And we will talk about that next week. But stereotype threat is when you, as a human being, feel as though you can't live up to a stereotype. So you do everything within your power to not live to that stereotype. And as I said, I'm middle-aged. I still watch 60 Minutes. And there was an excerpt on 60 Minutes about 2 or 3 weeks back where there's another professor at Harvard who basically talked about the stressors. There are certain stressors on people of color, especially those who live in America. And those stressors are weathering the human being. And the professor used a great analogy. He said, if rain falls on concrete for one day, it doesn't do anything to it. But if rain falls on that piece of concrete for 25 years, it weathers the concrete. And what he was talking about is in America, you have a gap in between whites and underrepresented minorities. And just about every segment of society. So you have a gap with health. And because he's focused on public health, the analogy that he gave was the loss of life, the premature loss of life in the Black community, and COVID basically put a spotlight on that, is equivalent to a jumbo jet with 265 people crashing every day for the year. That's the disparity in the health gap. And that's just one component of it. And I believe that we're holding back the whole entire country from competing. We need all of us to come together so that we could compete. When you start to look at it at a macro level is when you start to understand the impact that these divisions are creating with our competitiveness on a world global scale.
There's a lot to unpack there, Lee. That was pretty powerful.
I got a big head, and this big head in all of these books. I told a colleague of mine that I think I need to stop reading books, but I have a buddy. His name is Howard Josephson, and he still lives in New Jersey, so we owe each other a visit. But Howard, when I was coming out of college, he was there with my first job. And he told me something that he probably long forgot, but I still remember. He said, Lee, the more you learn, the less you know. And that, to me, is an opportunity to continue to grow. If I'm not growing, I'm dying. So I'm probably Amazon's biggest customer because I don't want to go on one of those little subscriptions. And I like to buy my Kindles and I highlight them, and it's always here near me so that if I have to pull up something. And there's a book that I have in here where I was talking to someone yesterday who was telling me that they had a certain fear. And I was able to go to my Kindle and pull up to them the exact definition of what is fear.
That's pretty cool.
Right? The exact definition of what is fear. And Ralph Waldo Emerson said, how do you overcome fear? You do the exact thing that you fear, and it goes away. And inside of the book, they use an analogy that just makes so much perfect sense. The analogy is you have a child. The child tells you that there's a boogeyman under the bed. So the father comes into the room, turns on the light, him and the kid with the flashlight go underneath the bed to tell the child that there is no boogeyman here. Look, we just looked. There's no boogeyman. So what is fear? Fear is a thought that's in your mind and your mind alone, and shadows have no reality. So fear has no reality. Now, I'm not saying you have to be cavalier and go jump off of a building because you have a fear of heights. No. But I'm saying if you do have a fear, you need to stare that fear in the eyes, take it on head on, and you will definitely overcome that fear. And that's some of what I have had to do in order to continue to be successful in my career.
Love that. That's great. Lee, I'm really excited for DE2I because I think it's going to make a tremendous impact on this pre-sales profession. I mean, I think that we have so much work to do as a profession generally, not just society, but if we focus on pre-sales, we have work to do. And I think this program is going to really lead from the front and really follow your lead as we continue to make an impact on the global community. So that being said, how can people get involved with DE2I?
Well, we've created a Slack channel, and the other day when I checked, I saw that there were about 150 something members who were in that channel. I want people to not be shy. I want this channel, this forum to be an opportunity for people to ask questions. I'm trying to educate myself on a daily basis, but there seems to be a lot of pronouns that people are putting behind their names. And I want to do that for myself, but I don't yet understand, well, what does it mean? So I'm going to bring that to our advisory council so that we can unpack that. So I figure sometimes you can be in the back of the room and not ask a question, but as they always say, there's probably someone else in the room who has that same question. I have confidence in myself to know that there is no stupid question, as they say, and I will ask the question. I want others who have a question to feel comfortable coming into the forum and engaging us and others in a conversation so that we could have a dialogue and make a 1% improvement. So we got a number of ideas, podcasts and vlogs and blogs and so many different things that we want to bring to this forum. But we have to temper ourselves because this is going to be a marathon, not a sprint. And we know that. So we want to bring you engaging content, engaging dialogue, and we want to have you engaged. And I want to try to reach out to the different chapter leaders so that we could help them with any diversity initiatives that they may have. And this is a global world. We're all interconnected, as COVID has taught us. I believe that we can take this thing internationally and make sure that we're making inroads wherever we go.
Love it, Lee. I'm really excited to see what DE2I program is going to do. And really thank you so much for all your energy, all your effort. I really enjoy our conversations. It's always a good time. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you and the council are going to be able to achieve for the global community and see the impact really at the end of the day that it's going to have on our profession.
James, this is your platform. This is your baby. And I am just really appreciative in what you have done here, what you have created. Thank you, UG, for the opportunity that you guys are allowing us to share your platform so that we can do something better in the world. So a big kudos to you. You've always been a mentor, showing me how this thing needs to get done, always giving great advice. So we're going to do this together. We're going to make the world a little bit of a better place. As they say, if you can leave it better than you found it, you've done something good.
That's what it's all about, Lee. I really appreciate the kind words. Thanks for joining me on the podcast, and looking forward to working on this program together with you. Appreciate it, Lee.
Thank you, sir. Have a great day.
You too. All right, PreSales Collective. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. As mentioned, Lee and I have been meeting on nearly a weekly basis for the past 2 months. So I always enjoy my conversations with Lee, and they go much like today's podcast episode. We just happen to be recording today. Hearing Lee's perspective about wishing he had a mentor early in his career to give guidance and advice is something that so many people say. Lee, as being one of the only Black men in the room multiple times in his career, he wishes that he had someone to look up to who could help him along the way. And that's what we want our DEEI program to do. And so with our program, we'll be defining what diversity, equity, equality, and inclusion can mean, what it means to pre-sales professionals, and create programs just to help us be better humans at the end of the day, making sure it's about humanity. And transparently, for those like myself that are a white male, understanding that we need to educate ourselves on these types of programs and what we can do to be better allies. And I've always appreciated that about my conversations with Lee, as he has helped me learn more so that I can be a better ally. And as we talk about our DEEI program, I love that he talks about the Bouquet of Humanity. And how we'll do that is through the PRESS model: problem awareness, root cause analysis, empathy, strategies, and sacrifice. So you'll see the PRESS framework being used a little bit more often with the DEEI program. Finally, I do want to thank Ash Davis, Amber Fallon, Melissa Giroux, Danny Anderson, Kanal Sos, and Stephanie Lee for being the members of our DEEI Advisory Council. We had over 20 applications from members all over the world and chose these 6 individuals to join Lee on that program. That said, there's going to be so many ways to get involved. And so please join the Slack channel, Diversity, Equity, Equality, and Inclusion, and join in on the discussion. I'm going to note the books that Lee brought up in the show notes, so check those out as well. All right, PreSales Collective, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. As always, I will see you next week.